Welcome Internet, thanks for tuning in to another Comics RX. I am of course MD Reese. I'm here to diagnose the problems I see in comics and prescribe solutions. Today we're going to be talking about Detective Comics 976, the first part of the 6-part Batman Eternal storyline. We're going to be talking about all 6 issues one at a time to kind of get a feel for this story because it hits on a lot of what I love about Batman and the Batman mythos and a lot of what I hate. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about my love of Tim Drake. Now, I'm a somewhat middle-aged fellow, and when I first started reading comics, Tim Drake had just become Robin. Now, a lot of what made Tim Drake unique as Robin happened before that time, but I came in to seeing Robin with the second issue of the 1991, I believe it was, might be 92, but it was the Robin miniseries, a 5-parter written by Chuck Dixon and penciled by Tom Lyle of Starman fame. And I just grew up loving Tim Drake. He was smart, he was witty, he was funny, a seriousness that was different from Tim, but he didn't have the darkness that was implicit within Jason, and he was dedicated to using his mind on all of that. He was a nerd hero, and I, being a nerd, just was drawn to that a lot. He had a lot to offer, and his take was different, and I talked about this in my Signal video. His story was a little different because he had a father, and I mean, there was some stuff going on with that, but he wasn't detached from his normal life. His normal life was part of his Bat life, and that made a different take on it. It wasn't wholly consumed in one thing or the other, and that was a fun thing, and it led to a whole different perspective on the Robin role. That was just great, and being my favorite character, they've really my favorite Robin anyway, they've really jerked around Tim Drake a lot, having both of his parents be killed, have his stepmom be killed, having his best friend killed, having his girl killed, all kinds of stuff, where they've just kept throwing trauma at Tim in a way that just has hurt the character, I think. And I don't care for the New 52 interpretation where he didn't discover Batman's identity, where he hadn't sussed that out. It makes him less of an interesting character, especially, and we're going to talk about that, with how many other people seem to know Batman's identity with no problem. And they may have changed that in the Rebirth universe. I don't know all of that. I do, have some limitations to my knowledge, but that's part of it. So let's dig in. The issue begins several weeks ago, right? And it tells the story. It is a reminiscent of the Orphan, Cassandra Cain, and a team-up she had with the recently deceased Sand Clayface. And there's the two of them working together in a very action-y page. I love the layout on that one. Well, one of the things we have with that is that that Clayface is a villain trying to be a hero, and Cassandra Cain in this iteration was an assassin who's trying to also be a hero. Now, in this universe, her having been Batgirl doesn't occur at all. She's just this orphan that was trained by an assassin in the whole thing. A lot of her history is apparently intact from the post-crisis, pre-52 DC universe, but she doesn't have the Batgirl aspect of all of that, which seems shocking to me. That's one of the main parts of her character and part of her history. Personally, I like Orphan as a name. I think it was natural to move on from having been Batgirl, but I don't like having it just extricated. It seems artificial to do that. One of the big aspects of the story is the redemption, and it's a flashback part of this story, and you see on this 2-page spread that the Orphan is going through her trauma with Dr. Leslie Tompkins, who is doing some psychotherapy there. The next little bit of story here we have, it's a flash side to the other part of the story, and what you see is that Batwoman and the Batwing and Azrael are working along with the colony to take down a nest of the Parliament of Owls, the Court of Owls. The Court of Owls happened at a time when I kind of wasn't reading very many DC comics, so I'm not really full up on all of that. It's a conspiracy that was deep rooted within Gotham and other districts, and these guys are going on a crusade for it. Now, an interesting little side note about this story is in many ways it's a thematic story to the rise of the Batman that happened, I think, 6 months before these ones were published. Might be wrong on that number. But the rise of the Batman, basically that Kate Kane, which is Bruce Wayne's maternal cousin, and her father, which was maternal uncle, clashed over this whole military involvement, and Mr. Kane, Corporal Kane, Colonel Kane, whichever his rank was running a black ops group called the Colony, which was tangentially allied with the U.S. government, but he was operating entirely off the reservation and doing operations that were basically anti-terrorist stuff all around the world. And he had taken the Batman imagery and some of the Batman technology and had recreated it. And one of his objectives ended up attacking the Bat family in the Rise of the Batman story, and they were able to take him down a peg and ended up giving him over to the authorities. And it turns out that because he'd gone off the reservation, that the Pentagon was out to get him. And so they went and swooped in and snatched up all the colony people, and apparently they played nice. Kane is back doing the colony thing, and he's reached out to Batwoman and Batwing and Azrael because they differ from Batman philosophically in that they're okay with lethal force given the right circumstances, and Bruce is not. And so there was this big rift that happened at some point earlier in the story that I didn't catch entirely. I think it was the time when Future Tim comes back, and we're going to get into that here in a little while. So, long and short of it is that they are going to be rebuilding the colony with the promise of it making it more legal and less lethal, but lethal when it has to be. And it's coming to that. Now, little side note, Batwing is a terrible name. That is an airplane, and it has been since '89. Calling a superhero Batwing just seems reductive, especially because they're giving it to Lucius Fox's kid, who's supposed to be a big deal. And he thinks he'd have a better idea than to name himself after an airplane. Talked about this with a Signal. It's grating. They could have picked all kinds of things. Could have done a pun on the name Fox. The largest breed of fox of bat, is called a flying fox, which also would harken back to Roy Thomas's work on Young All-Stars, where there was a shaman named Flying Fox, who was his kind of replacement for Batman in the post-crisis golden age, sort of, kind of. But they could have done something other than call him Batwing, which just does, it's ridiculous. If you're anybody over 30 who's read Batman or grew up watching the Tim Burton films, it's grating for me. Azrael, I love the costume. I'm actually going to go back to that page quick. The costume that he has in this iteration is it's just so cool. One of the things, nothing against Joe Quesada, but his whole Azrael costume seemed far too flashy for the nature of the character as an underground assassin, as an underground military operative for this cult. And I just think that his current costume is much more fitting to that. So that's really fun. Another thing I love about the Azrael being part of the Bat family is it's a name that doesn't sound like Bat. It's like it's got its own flavor and its own feel, but there's still a coordination between those things. I want to get back to the cover now. Okay, the cover was the big issue, right? And I haven't talked about the cover, but I'm going to right now. This is what got me on the shelf. It's Batman looking all pissed off, Red Robin, running off, saying, "Never again." He says, "I trusted you, Batman, never again." And while I'm really annoyed with this trope, this Robin getting pissed off at Batman and going off and doing a thing. It's become just a boring part of the way stories are being told right now. At the same time, it made me curious, because this is a drama between them. They're both dynamic, powerful characters who have a clear vision of the future, and that conflict makes it really interesting. Well, what was the nature of this conflict? I want to see, right? So let's go back to this conflict. We're getting to the cover. So Tim comes down to talk to Bruce, and Tim says, "Hey, look, I've been working on this thing. We had this whole..." I have to back up a little bit. If you haven't been following Detective Comics at all since the coming of the Rebirth, you might have missed that Detective Comics became the Bat Family book. And there was a team that was set up around an idea Tim had called the Knights Protocol, where basically Tim was designing the structure, Batwoman was doing instructing, and they were teaching young vigilantes to be awesome. So they're not putting themselves in danger, not putting themselves in harm's way, is the idea. So Tim, there were some problems with the system. It was attacked during the Night of the Batman situation, during the whole Clayface thing. Clayface had died. There was something called the King Clayface episode that I didn't catch all of the ins and outs of that. But it was a situation where all of these things happened, and Batgirl comes up and says, "This whole Knights Protocol was a bad idea, and you can trust..." The Burnside Batgirl just gets under my skin so much. Barbara Gordon has been done an injustice by becoming Batgirl again. She was such a stronger character as Oracle. She meant more to the DC universe. She meant more to everyone, and so that just gets me. But back to the point, Batgirl had an issue with it. And Batman has said, "We're not doing the Knights Protocol anymore." And Tim says, how can you do that? How can you do that to us? "Bruce, it's a great idea, and you're going to die someday. Who's going to fight crime when you're gone? Batgirl was wrong. We have to have somebody to carry the torch, because eventually you're not going to be there." And Batman says, "Batgirl was right. We can't trust our plans. We can't trust the future. We can only trust me, because I'm Batman and I know. And you would understand if you were the right in the head, Tim. But you're not right in the head, because you've been taken prisoner by Mr. Oz," which happened earlier. It looked like Tim had died, but he was transported to another dimension. And that happened during the Rise of the Batman story, right? And you can't trust that, Tim, because you're suffering stress from this. And then shortly after we thought you came back from the dead, and all of a sudden it was an evil Tim from the future who was Batman, who was dedicated on killing Batwoman, because that was the only thing that could save the day. And so we can't trust that. And the evil Tim from the future, I can't stand that idea. It first came up in Titans Tomorrow, a story in Jeff Johns' Titans series. And it was an okay story, where we saw this future, the Teen Titans get all dark and jaded because the superheroes weren't tough enough and the world's overrun by villains, and so you have a gun-wielding Tim coming back, and you've got a nearly sadist Wonder Girl and all kinds of stuff, and these guys are ruling the world tyrannically because they're the evil Titans from the future. And then the young Titans who haven't been corrupted have to fight their older selves, and it's kind of a tired story. It was fun, don't get me wrong, but it left an imprint, and this evil Tim from the future has shown up several times where this is an issue. So the evil Tim came back in Detective Comics, and they had to fight him off, and it was a whole deal. And I can't stand that trope. I don't like to use trope, the cliche, the evil Tim from the future. But Batman says, "Tim, we can't trust you because you're going through all of this, and I think you're going to turn into evil Tim from the future." And Tim says, "That's stupid. I know me. I don't know what I'm about, and I'm not some kid you can just boss around." And Bruce says, "Of course you are. Now just do what I say." And Tim jumps off and runs off, and he's all pissy, right? And so then he goes on, and he basically goes and he is waylaid by Ulysses Hadrian Armstrong, who was the tech guy from the colony. who's a tech guy from the colony in The Rise of the Batman. And he says, well, you know, I know all about your secrets, and I got them from the evil Tim Drake from the future. You want to know the secrets? I've got them on this disposable medium, this flash drive thing. And that's where the issue ends. And it ends with another irritant for me, right there at the bottom. You see that little symbol? See that little symbol? That is the brother I. Right? And I'm going to talk about how much I dislike that later from OMAC. But that's a whole thing. Anyway, that's where we're going to leave it today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, like, subscribe, do the whole hit the bell thing, tell your friends, share it around, leave comments below, and I'll follow up with you all. So I'm not going to get into my whole prescription thing. I've talked a little bit about some of the things I like and disliked about this issue as we went, and I'm going to give my final diagnosis at the end of the series. So hopefully you guys stick around for that. As a whole, I will tell you in brief, it was a fun read. But as I said, I wish there was more detecting in this issue. We'll see where it goes from there. It's Detective Comics. We'll play with that. Anyway, thank you for sticking around, and have a great one.